Good morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering current events on this here Thursday morning, Rise and Shine. Current events we're looking at here, and we're looking at a topic, changing the identity of the American people or changing the identity of a people. So this is what we're looking at here this morning as we do our live talk program covering the current events that are going on in our world. Thanks for joining me here. Looking forward to interesting discussion here. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, again for your love and for the blessings of this day, for the blessings of life. Pray that you may be with us as we look at these words that I'll be sharing from your word and from what's going on. Pray that you may bless us by thy spirit, we pray for Christ's sake. Amen. So I'm looking at this topic here, and this is something that I guess is an ongoing thought in my mind and observation, and it is the changing the identity of the American people. And so I want to look at this here because this to me is a current discussion that keeps coming up, and the two backdrop that I have in my mind is this issue that is happening with the immigration debate and also the issue that is going on with the new elected person that is nominated to be the next Supreme Court judge, Kavanaugh, I think his name is. So, want to look at this here. So, we're going to start off here with Bible passage, and as I say, very important discussion because this is what the Bible say will happen. So before I get into that, I want to read this text here, which is very familiar. Proverbs 14, verse 34. Proverbs 14, verse 34 says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. So righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. It is something that is a rebuke. Normally they say something is self-evident. This is what we're going to be looking at here in a second. And there's things that as you look at it, it becomes self-evident that something is changing. And that change is not a change for the better. As we know, Ellen G. White says it in this way. She says that ultimately America will divorce itself from God. And so this is not something new. So I'm going to explore that idea here this morning. So the question is, how does that happen? Normally over the years, we normally would postulate that it happened. Normally we say when America just overturned its constitution and get rid of the amendment to, protect freedom of speech. Sorry, freedom of religion. But she says it different in the book Final Great Controversy, the chapter Final Warning. She says literally it will be a piece by piece. Laws will be enacted. And so as these laws enacted, things change and they slowly change until the culminating act is the phrase she used, is the final act. This idea is similar to the story of Samson. If you remember the story of Samson, Samson's story was like this, that he was making steps towards this divorcing himself from God. And his hair was the last straw. It was like the last thing that had to go. And as long as he kept that hair, that was the symbol. The hair was like a symbol, a sign between him and God. And he did almost everything, and yet still God's blessing was upon him. He slept with whores. He seemed to have a particular affinity for whores. He played on the edges of immorality and taking chances with his life. But there came a day when he basically, everything that he did before, he ended up causing him to lose his hair. And it caused him through the same whore, one of the whores that he loved. So this is why that idea here in Revelation 17, when he talks about, you see that whore sitting on scarlet colored beast, that's the thing that destroys them. If you lie with dogs, you catch fleas. So the issue, why this is important again, is because as you see the country move in a direction from both the liberal and the conservative, the urban and the rural group of people, both groups, you have to observe both. then you can see how things are moving. You know, as when the liberals are in charge or the Democrats are in charge, you see they're big with free sex and homosexuality and all of the manner of immorality. Then when the conservatives in charge, you see the warmongering, unkindness, but claiming the Bible. So you see both sides just eating away like a rot of the American people and trying to change. Both sides are pushing the American people and telling them, this is who you are. This is who you are. This is who we are. And but what they're dressing up as what it is to be a true American is not anything that has anything to do with morality. Has to do with divorcing oneself from God. And so both sides is pushing at the margins or the edges to divorce themselves from God and divorce the American public and tell the American public, this is who you are. So if you're liberal, it's anything goes, and now people are pansexual. If you're conservative, you seem to have a definite hating for anybody that is not American or brown, white skin and things like that. So both groups is defining. So if you're in America and you're in either group, you have to identify a certain way. You're forced to, and you have to embrace the idea that this is who you are. And but that does not have nothing to do with morality. So look at it again. Proverbs 14 verse 34. Righteousness exalted a nation, but sin is a reproach to a people. So the what's interesting about this right now is that our current atmosphere is that everything is being done politically right now is to make America great again, is to exalt America. But the things that are being done is similar to me what President Obama did. His move was to, make America great again, to build back the country. But some of the things that were being done was to exalt sin. And that becomes a reproach to people. And if you look at what we're doing now, we're exalting sin. So I'll read the Declaration of Independence, the beginning part of it. And then I'll go to why am I saying all of this. So it says here, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So these are rights. You have a right to pursue life the way you want to pursue life, happiness the way you want to pursue it. That's the reality. And as we see this, everything can be all the last, say, 20 years, 30 years, 20 years, the actions of the presidents and the people that support the president, to me, in some degree or the other, is an expression of this idea. It is still in the psyche of the people, as I observe from a wider national point of view, at least from my observation, that this concept here of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is there. Those who want to live a certain lifestyle, they want nothing to encroach on that lifestyle, and they want the freedom to live that lifestyle. And so out of that we got to build a wall, or we got to legalize gay marriage, or we got to do all these different things. We got to not put requirements on businesses that has to do with not poisoning the groundwater, not poisoning the rivers and so forth. No restriction, because the person who is trying to make money, you put restriction on him, you're basically taking away his opportunity to make money. So unfettered capitalism becomes part of this idea. That's part of the we call it what my topic again is, the identity of the American people. So you can see it in the psyche. When you deal with an American, you can see that idea that the identity is wrapped in that constitution. You can see it in them, that it is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whatever that is, even if it means taking a whole bunch of cocaine. That's me pursuing my happiness. So anyhow, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That means when you look at a human being, as I've said here before often, that all men are created equal. And that is true. As I always say, you can have a person very bright, but they can't tie the shoes lace, or have certain skills to say paint art, and it blows your mind how they do it, but yet they have two left foot, and they're almost tripping over themselves when they run, and that's life. So it makes people equal, even in that aspect, because one person might have some skills but they don't have certain skills for other things. So we all in this game together. Anyhow, that they are endowed with by their creator with certain unalienable rights. So these rights are rights that are unalienable rights. You can't alienate these rights from a person, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So now come to why I came here to talk about this morning. Is this idea here again as the change in identity of the American people, because this is part of the identity of the American people. So you deal with an American. This thing here is supposed to be so drilled down and part of the culture that you can recognize it in the culture, that the culture understand, the individual persons in the culture understand this idea that one should be free to be able to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. All right? So when you take now the discussion coming in about immigration, it can be viewed from both point of view, right? The immigrant is coming because they're pursuing life, liberty, and happiness, right? But also, the person that's in America is also can look at it from the point of view of, if too much people come through the borders, they could affect my life, liberty, and my happiness. So each group can view it one way or the other, right? And this is something that is just part of the reality. I have my yard, and there's a border to my yard, and that's my property. And if somebody come and say they want to put up a tent in my yard, I could say, no, that's going to affect my liberty. And the person could say, yeah, or my happiness. And the person could say, yeah, I affect your happiness, but I'll be happy if I get to put up the tent in your yard. And then that becomes a problem, because I feel like the tent in my yard is going to be a eyesore. And they're probably going to start to want to put up a line, and they want to be able to hang their clothes and all that type of stuff. And I'm like, no, there need to be some requirements here, restrictions here, because you're not start to encroach upon my happiness. So this is sometimes the argument that a person will take when it comes on to immigrants, because they say there has to be a legal, straightforward process. But again, it's just the way it's going. So now, if I can take two arguments or two things that are going on, that are discussions that are going on, and then I'm going to get to some more text and ideas. So think about this now. The new person that is being nominated by President Donald Trump to be the next, the next Supreme Court judge. There was one thing that jumped out at me, and I guess it will come up more later on in discussions. And it's this thing where there was a case, and he had write an opinion piece about not giving certain constitutional rights to an immigrant because they're not American. And this is something that I discussed a few weeks back. So I thought, okay, I'm going to bring this in there here for you to think about. Because remember, I'd talked about a few weeks ago this idea that is this statement here in the Declaration of Independence, this opening statement, is this statement for only Americans, or is this statement a true statement? Period. It's just a statement of life. That means if I'm here right now and I say I moved to Kenya, just pick a country, right? So I'm in Kenya, and I'm American, and I've been inculcated with this idea that God gives these rights. These rights are the inalienable rights. Would I, as an American, be not required, but as somebody as being faithful to my upbringing and my philosophy of life, and what makes me happy? Would I offer that in my dealings when I'm dealing with, say, with a Kenyan? Would I offer that to them? Would I say, as an American, I'm going to respect your rights because you are created equal and the Creator has given you certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because remember, that's part of the psyche, the identity of the people. Because remember, when the Bible describes a nation, it's not describing the landmass, it's describing the people. In general, this idea here, people when they study prophecy, they don't understand these symbols represent the people. Is it, if the people are in view, then you would not say that this is just some constitutional. This is saying this is something that's in the psyche of the people. This is something that's unique, that makes America unique and Americans unique across the globe to any other group of people. It would be like if you run into a British person, they can be quite stoic and quite reserved and proper. And you would say that's part of the basic identity of a British person. It's part of just the way they do business there. It's in their way of mannerism and so. But if you run into American, you would say, okay, part of the identity of the American public is that they believe in this idea that there are certain rights that are given. And for that reason why America would say, oh yeah, that's why we're going to have gay rights, because that's their happiness. And we believe that we should give them their happiness. You see, those is part of just the identity. So you look at the people, you see how they behave. It's like, okay, we'll have certain rules and regulation and certain zoning rules, so that one person does not encroach upon the other. But then now the flip of that is, say you're talking about immigration and you have certain rules again, you would say, well, yeah, we have these rules because as an American, I believe also that, these people fleeing from tyranny, they're fleeing from whether it be a war zone, or they're fleeing from starvation, or they're fleeing from gang culture. We should allow them to come on in, even if it encroaches against us, because that's part of our identity. We recognize that people should have the right to pursue happiness, and they can pursue happiness in that area. So you can see how both sides of the argument could work. So when you go back to looking at Kavanaugh, there's a piece that he wrote, and in the future I'm going to try to delve into it a little bit more to try to understand what's coming. And he wrote a piece, and opinion piece, where he said the person does not have that right. And I think this is interesting because more and more I'm realizing that part of the change in identity of America, or some Americans, is that the right is not an unalienable right. It's a right that you can alienate from the person. Depends if they are of an American citizenship. And that is a shift, I guess. But that shift is not per se new, because if you remember, at one point, the same people who wrote these statements did not apply these statements to blacks that were taken from Africa. They basically removed their rights, and they had them as basically kidnapped. They kidnapped them, brought them here, and then abused them, and did not give them any life, any liberty, and did not give them the opportunity to pursue happiness. So we understand, but at least amongst themselves, they saw it as they had the right. This was their right because they were created by God. The other people were not, or something. Then at other points, you have this idea here of the civil rights. The civil rights movement came about because somebody says, well, we can ask for these rights because these rights are in the Constitution. You see, you couldn't go to, say, South Africa. The South Africans couldn't go to the South African whites and say, give us these rights because these rights are part of the Constitution. There was no legal framework for that. But in America, the legal framework and what is taught the children is this concept here, that this, there's this big statue over there in the waters between New York and New Jersey that is a Statue of Liberty. This kind of idea here that even if somebody, because there are people who say, well, that law, that's not in the Constitution. Well, it's really there. I've heard people, I'm sure you've heard people say, or there's no, I think the statement of the Statue of Liberties, bring me your downtrodden and those who have been beaten up and whacked in the head, and bring them to me in America here, and we'll receive them. So some people say, no, that's not in the Constitution. Well, it's here. If you read it properly, the idea is there in the Constitution. It's very clear there. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The question, though, what is not in the Constitution, does this apply to human beings, and does Americans as an identity, as a person, a culture, do they offer these rights to others? Because basically in the Constitution it says yes. As I read the Constitution, it says they're self-evident and unalienable rights. It doesn't say these rights should only apply to Americans. It said these rights should be given by Americans. That means I want to go to the Kenyan and ask them to give me these rights because that's not part of their cultural identity. They don't identify that way. But, and I'm saying that without knowing the Kenyan Constitution, I'm just saying in general, based on me not knowing what it is. I never met a Kenyan who purport these ideas. But when you meet Americans, the part of the identity of America is to purport this idea. So now when I read someone like a Kavanaugh, and he comes and he says, nope, those rights are not for foreigners. Those rights are not given by foreigners. Then the question that I like to ask, and there's probably a simple answer for it, is, do you believe that these rights are only for those who are born in America? And if you do believe that, then did you believe that, do you say, well, which group? Because remember, at one point, the Native Americans were here before white Europeans, and they never got their constitutional right. The Constitution never applied to them. The American people never gave it to them. So somebody would say, well, Lord, based upon that information, these rights were never inalienable. They were just rights given to white people from Europe. They were never given to those who are outside of that. And so this is where now, as I say, I think in the open, probably for the first time, or as we close out American history, that America will be having a discussion and basically more and more telling the American public that these rights are only for those who are born in the country. And then that will take us back to what the founding fathers did. That although this is said on paper, that these are self-evident right, these are God-given right, and these are rights you can take away from a person, can alienate from the person. That I guess today in the discussion where you have the judges come out and say, no, these are only American citizens' right. If you're an American citizen, you get this right. If you're not, we don't give you this right. Hence, why this is so important? Because this will go back. Because remember, the gentleman that is going into the Supreme Court now, he had worked on with President Bush. And so remember, President Bush's idea was that you can torture people, imprison people without evidence, and you don't have to give them a right because they are not American citizens. So if you have a person who worked and was a legal counsel for the President Bush, then you can understand why legally President Bush would think that was right. Because you have a person like this person that's coming in who don't believe that you should give anybody the right unless they're American citizens. And this is important because remember, they're backed by evangelicals, and evangelicals thought at one point that black people didn't have that right. And they thought about that even up until recent, because it's recently they got rid of the Confederate flag. They were never in agreement with the United States Supreme Court or the Congress or the Senate that black people should get that right. So this is why this is going to be troubling, because these men are not only writing legal precedents, they're advising precedents that you should not extend that right to anybody except on American citizens. And because their history is of such that they have a history of not, especially when we talk about conservative, in that type of environment, they have a history of taking away the rights of others while claiming that they have the right. See, for me, just in case you wonder where I stand, I believe that these rights are God-given rights. You know, how do I know that? Because I can find it in the Bible. The whole idea of the plan of salvation, the Lord dealing with the devil and giving us life and mercy and all that, is that God gave us the freedom of choice even when we make bad choice. God is against certain things like kidnapping. So, somebody said, wait a minute, but I thought the Bible was pro-slavery. The Bible acknowledge the reality of in society that there's slavery and lay down rules as how best to do, if you're going to do it, how best to not be oppressive. But the Bible is anti-kidnapping. The Bible says if a person kidnap a person, they should be murdered. They should be killed for kidnapping. So if you look at the founding fathers, many of them biblically should have been taken out and stoned for keeping slaves because they were kidnapped people, kept at gunpoint. So when you look at this, why I say now, changing the identity of the American people, because what it is that we have two successive administrations that have lawyers and now putting people in the Supreme Court that is basically telling the American public that they don't have to give any rights, any even human rights, to anyone unless they're American citizen. That is important. They don't have to. You as an American, if not looking where you're listening from, but if you're an American, listen to me. Basically, people like Kavanaugh, President Bush, President Donald Trump is saying, these rights are only if you're born in America. And yet America has an history of taking away the rights of people, even when they're born in the country, even when they're American citizens. But as an individual, you should know that these rights are inalienable rights. They're not rights that I give you. I don't give you no rights. The police doesn't give you any right. The police recognize your right. The American government, the IRS, doesn't give you a right to assemble and do church. The government acknowledges your right. There's a difference. I don't get permission to do church from the American government. They know I exist and I lead a church, but that's all it is. It's just they just know that I'm there. Just in case somebody asks a question, I make sure it's very clear what we're doing over here. But they can't give you a right to worship God. They can't take away that right. No, somebody said, but wait a minute, isn't that only one of the America is America one of the only countries that give that right? No, America is probably the only country that acknowledge that right, not give it. There's a difference, and I know many even people who are pastors and leaders in ministry, they seem to not understand this concept. They think to be that if they do it at church, they must ask the government for permission and they must file a 501c3 and all that type of stuff. They don't understand. No. The moment you declare there's a group of people over here worshiping God and it's called a church, the government said we have nothing to do with that. We don't need to know how much money you collect. We don't need to know how many people assemble. We don't need to know nothing. It is totally independent of us because we cannot give that right. You're not a business. You're not an organization. You're not a regular nonprofit. The moment you say church, I say, okay, none of our business. You all do what you do and we don't ask you no questions. As I say, you can go to people of the people, and I could say this to somebody, even as I say in the church for years, and they'll be like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, because they don't understand their American Constitution, their rights that cannot be, they're not given, they're acknowledged, and so what they're telling you now is that these political leaders and these gentlemen, especially from the right, they're saying that, oh no, we don't have to give them that right. And the problem is like, whoa. You can't say that. You don't give nobody any rights around here. You can take away their right and go against the Constitution that you swear to. And you can go against God, but you're not giving nobody no right. You're acknowledging the right. And you're working to defend that right because as a government, you say these are rights that I swear to defend and uphold. But now they're saying no. We don't give that right. So now go back now to the debate. So the debate now going on right now, as you know, is this issue of like separating these kids and then dealing with this influx of immigrants coming from down south. So the question then now is that has the government done wrong by taking away a child, separating a child from the parent, and not knowing, because the date has expired for these children to be reunited with their parents. And now ICE is saying, well, some of these kids we're not going to be able to reunite because we didn't put in place a process to keep track of the parents so that we could reunite them. So we don't really know where these parents are and how we're going to get in touch with them. So some of these kids are going to be permanently separated. Again, that don't somebody could say, but Lord, that's not in the Constitution. I understand, but in unalienable rights or rights given by a creator, that it doesn't have to be written in a book. It's self-evident. You do not separate a child from his mom or from her mom. It is unless you're a duck or something and you just quack quack all day long and you just dumb as a nut. If you live long enough for you as a 5-year-old, and we're not talking about 5-year-olds here, we're talking about grown men that are in their 50s and 60s. One of them I think is in his 30s. The young guy that seemed to be a monster. Can't remember his name. That advised the president. We're talking about grown men here with kids. That you know the system. The system is, if you go before the court, unless the mother is so dysfunctional and destructive, the court is always going to side with the mother and give the child to the mother. So somebody said, well, why is it a rule? Because if you ask me that question, then you need to listen to Revive Reform more often. I need to talk some sense in your head. It's just a rule that you see and it's easily observed. Nobody need to write a law to say that the child stay with the mother. It is just something that is an observed rule. Unless the mother is so unfit, you never separate the child from the mother. And unless the mother choose to hurt the child mentally and give up the child, say, for adoption or stuff like that, especially when the child is very young, probably the child don't know. A lot of time the children suffer great harm in that situation. You don't separate the child from mother. So there's some rules that, as I said, they're not spoken rules, they're observed rules. But I understand if you're arguing with a teenager and the person is 16 and they're really a dull 16-year-old, they play too much video games. I can understand. They're saying, why is that a rule? Why should we separate children from their mothers? And I'm like, I understand. You're young and foolish. But when we're talking about grown men, there's no excuse. So for a person that's going to be the Supreme Court leader, he is going to have the power given by the American public vote, given by the president, and then now the Senate and the Congress or whoever have to sign off on it. He's going to go in there and going to say, these rights are not self-evident. They're not for people who are non-U.S. citizens. And he's going to follow in the darkness of his forefathers. And he's going to go ahead and take away these rights. Even though the Constitution say they're not given by man, they're recognized by man. But God gave us this right. You see, the Bible describes Satan as being the one that hold people in prison and never let the captive go. God doesn't do that. See, it was under the leadership of President Bush that we saw that tyranny, where they would capture people who were accused, never proven to have done terrorism, and lock them in prison indefinite without no evidence and no trial. So some things are self-evident, that if you're going to deprive somebody of life, liberty, and happiness, then you have to prove that it's warranted. But to go just lock somebody up and say you get life imprisonment, and then the person says, so what's the evidence against me? We don't know. Who accused me? Oh, we don't know. Who convict me of a crime? Nobody. We're just going to lock you up and keep you here. And now, somebody like this now, so just see what's happening. He's now going to become, it could be, I don't know what's going to happen. But I was saying he's nominated to become the next Supreme Court Justice. Then we have the head of the CIA who used to run a torture site. And now this person is now the head of the CIA. And so we have all these people now being put into key position to fill out a leadership that will make America great again. But as I read, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to a people. And somebody said, well, yeah, but it's not written in the Constitution. They can do all that. No, it is in the Constitution. That's what I argue. And I'm arguing similar to what Martin Luther King Jr. argued. He said, well, we don't have no civil rights, but basically under your Constitution, we can ask for it. And we can ask for you to recognize our civil rights. And sensible people then say, oh yeah, you're right. It's there. I didn't notice that it was there. You're a created being? Yeah. I'm not three-fourths of a human being. I'm a full human being. So the moment you recognize that black people were full human beings, and they were not one-fourth or half or 75% of human beings, they had functional brains, and their skin color was actually not a bad thing. It actually made their skin tough with the melanin and all that type of stuff. Then you realize, oh, wow, so you guys are full human beings. Yeah. Brain function, if we go to school, we learn just like you. We can walk upright, and we don't love just melons and fried chicken. We can like beef too. And so forth. So if you do that, then all of a sudden you say, well, okay, so if you're a full human being and you didn't evolve and you're not the primate or whatever, the closest thing to a chimp, oh, so we got to give you rights. Yeah. But it's the same thing here. Because remember, although I don't want a person to camp out in my front yard, but if there's a problem, and I know, say for instance, where I live in a high elevated area. So if 10 miles away, somebody's living in a low elevation, and there's a storm coming through and there's a flooding, and I'm like, uh-oh, and the person said, man, could I camp out in your front yard? And I say, yeah, you can camp out in my front yard. So somebody said, well, what's the difference then? The difference is that there's an emergency. An emergency changes rules because now this person life, liberty, and their happiness is being messed up by a storm. I now have to be merciful, because I think this is why all these people are missing. And say, wow, I have to be merciful and say, you know what, Ben, I understand your situation. I'm going to show you some mercy, because although I don't want nobody to mess up my lawn, I'm going to have to take you in. You're an evacuee. You are escaping a disaster. To me, that's the difference. See, that's the Christian response. It's not somebody said, well, but the law of the land is that there's immigration law. Sure, yeah, there's immigration law to take in more people from Europe. But if a person is fleeing tyranny, what is the talk about legality? If I'm running for my life, what do I care? I mean, you can kick me back out, but I don't really care. What's the most gonna happen to me? I cross over, cross over some water, or I jump a fence or a wall. You arrest me, and then you process me for a few weeks, a month or whatever, 3 months, and then you kick me back to where I come from. What did I lose? I didn't lose nothing. I mean, I wasted time, but at least I'm still alive for 3 more months. But I could go back, and all you do is send me back to tyranny. So to say that people need to come to a legal process, how am I going to come to a legal process when I'm running for my life? I'm scared straight. As I said, the same thing. If there's a flood and somebody run to their house and then run down the road and they say, hey, could I put your tent here? You're high and dry. I'm like, yeah, sure. What am I going to do? I'm going to say, oh, no, there's a legal process. You have to go downtown and you have to apply. They have to give me the zoning to put you on my property. There's just no place for that. No, somebody say, yeah, but what if they come and they get their kids separated? Oh no, you see, no, that's where the problem. Because the problem now is that's the monstrosity. That's now where there's those wickedness. Because I'm sure a mother coming with their child, and they come and say they're coming for prosperity. They're not coming because the poverty's gotten to them, and they decide, look, I need to escape. I need to come for better. They came for better, but they didn't know that, there's a monster over there, and that monster is going to eat your child. And that's what's happening. So this is, to me, is gross darkness. Because when we look through history, It was always these monsters that like to do these things to kids. It was the Egyptian Pharaoh who decided because his people, because the Jews were growing in number, and he was scared because of the demographic shift, that monster decided to start killing the Hebrew kids to protect his people's status, because he said if they get too big, they become a problem. So every time a people, you notice in history, become fearful of their status change, they start to go after the kids. And they start to do things to limit the birth, limit the prosperity of those that are not theirs. This is nothing new. It's not unique to any group of people. People do this. If you look again with Herod, when Herod took note and realized, wait a minute, there could be a true king born that was Jew, and he was the king that the Jews were waiting for. He started with this thing where he started wiping out the kids again. And for that reason, Jesus fled and went to Egypt. So people have been arguing and saying, well, Jesus went to Egypt, and there's a recent situation where one of the girls that work with President Trump said that Jesus, I guess, went to Egypt legally. I guess the concept probably is because Herod was in charge of that area of the world, because the Romans were in charge. Well, here's the thing. Christ was not fleeing from one place in the Roman Empire to another place with his head up. He was sneaking in because Herod didn't know that he left, or that Joseph and Mary took him away. Number one. Number two, I would say here is that, again, when you're fleeing death, there's no, do you get up and flee? As I say, I don't understand why they're talking about you're fleeing being murdered. You just run. Have you ever had something happen to you that you have to run? You're not thinking about what you're doing. You just running. If you have to run to the middle of the street, it's just, look, I'm about to get shot or get stabbed. I'm not thinking, oh, I could run to the street and get run over by a car. I'm just like, I'll take my chances. As a matter of fact, you don't even think about taking your chances. You just run. Or whatever happens, happens. Because that's the reality of life. So to say that, a person fleeing, it should be because Christ, whatever. No, they were fleeing tyranny from, again, another monster that do things. As I say, to me, whether it be President Trump or whether it be the Catholic Church and the abuse of all these little kids, whoever or whatever does these things, to me, you just lose your argument. You just basically paint yourself as the devil when you start doing that to kids. And somebody said, but there's no rule. There is a rule. You don't separate children from their mothers. That's just the rule. Somebody said, well, show me the law. Is there a law in the American system? There don't have to be a law. You just don't be a monster. What is it? You don't know that you shouldn't separate a child from his mom? That's going to leave the child with scars for life. I've known people even dislike their parents because their parents gave them up at a certain point. And when they were young, and they just never forgive them for that because they suffer abuse. So to grab a child and take away a child and say you're doing this for American public, then to me that is wrong. So this now brings me back to the topic. Go around the world and back again, right? Changing the identity of the American people, to me, is what's really happening. Because what's going to happen is this, that more and more you're going to hear Americans who are conservative, they are now pushed in a situation that they all have to back, or a majority of them have to back this idea that these things are right. And these things are being done in their name to make America great again, or to save them from the demographic shift. Because this is what's really happening. Many of the conservative whites, they are concerned that their numbers are dwindling and that their status in America is changing. And so a lot of these things are being done to save them from the demographic shift. As I say, Egypt did it. Herod was afraid of his leadership. He did it. And so they're willing to do anything, even monstrous, and taking away rights that God give in order to do it. But as you see they do this, what it is, they're basically doing what Herod did and what Pharaoh did. They're delegitimizing themselves, and they're making it that any punishment come their way from God is legitimate. And any punishment that come on their kids is illegitimate. They're legitimizing their own doom. Because why? Remember, when, because people say, well, God slay all these kids in Egypt, all the firstborn. Well, remember, the Egyptians did it first. And it was a punishment, and God actually gave them an opportunity to don't do that. So the same conservative there, even this great man that is called Kavanaugh, you will see things happen to people like that and their kids, and you'll be like, wow, that's so wicked. What terrible, that's a terrible thing that happened. And then you say, wait a minute, oh yeah, he's the guy that make it legal to punish all these people. See all Trump and their kids? They're doing this type of stuff and they're thinking, oh yeah, they're big and tough. And that's going to happen to them because they're multi-billionaires. I don't understand. God is not a respecter of person. And a few $1 billion in the bank is not going to stop God and block God. You can't block God. God does what he wants to do. So important to watch and note this. But the change in identity of the people is happening, where we see they're being pushed in a corner where they have to say, if I'm conservative and I'm white, I'm for these things. And that's not good, because now they're saying that I no longer, just in case you miss it, I no longer believe that there's self-evident rights. I no longer believe that certain rights are given by God, and I should acknowledge them. I shouldn't take them away. They have to also say, I cannot recognize a person who is suffering and fleeing to escape that suffering. I cannot give them I cannot recognize their right for liberty, for life, and to pursue happiness. And I have to be mean because I have to protect me. It's all about me. But for me, the concept that is beautiful, that makes America beautiful, is this idea that, to me, many Americans, even still to this day, recognize this. And it's part of their mode of behavior. That they're equal rights. And that men are created equal. This is why there was the push to abolish slavery. Because many European Americans says, no, we got to do this. There are many European Americans who said, no, we got to give civil rights. There are many Americans who said, no, we got to stop the torture of people by our same fellow American citizens all over the world, in Libya and Syria and Thailand, I think it was, and in Cuba and all these places. There are many American citizens now who are still saying, no, that's part of our identity. We don't separate children from their parents. No, these rights are labor rights. We help these people. We're merciful. But there's a part of our citizens that have made up their mind that, nope, that's not them. They're going to take away these rights because they give it. Now I'm going to read this text here, which I think is applicable. Exodus chapter 32, verse 1 through 14. Now, this is the story of Aaron. And Aaron is going to do here, is going to basically, to me, change the identity of Israel. Remember, Israel served one God. They didn't serve pagan gods. And Israel believed in the law of that God. By changing the God that Israel worshiped, they were changing Israel. So a people can change their identity, in other words. So I'll read it for you here, but I'll tell you what I'm reading before. Now look at it. It says, and the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount. And the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron, and said unto him, up, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. So the people told him to make us gods. Because Moses has gone, so we're good. We're going to go different. And they're going to go back to the gods of the Egyptians. Now remember, the gods of the Egyptians were oppressing them. So when you think about America, and you think about what's going on, America fled from Europe. But America, if they start taking on this idea that there's no creator God, these are unalienable rights, then it is easy for America to say, or the American people to say, you have no right to worship God according to the dictates of your conscience. Where would they get that from? From where they left. They left Europe, who didn't give them that right, and they came to America, and they said these rights can't be taken away. But if they go back to European way of doing business, and they go back to taking away people's rights, and they don't see these are rights that need to be recognized because they were not recognized and are not recognized in Europe, it's going to be a problem. America will cease to be what America is. So here, the Egyptians, the Hebrews were saying, make us the gods of Egypt. Well, wait a minute, but you've just fled Egypt. Egypt was beating you up. Why would you want to go back to that? And the mistake they're making is that if you start taking away the rights of immigrants and taking the rights of the poor and the sick and those who are less fortunate, which has always happened, but if you make that become a national identity, then nobody's rights is going to be upheld. The same people who are today, like your Kavanaugh, the President Bush and his kids, are today saying, take away everybody's rights. Who's going to give them their right? I mean, what are they going to do? I hire a military to protect them? Because everybody's going to be like, I ain't taking you away. I'm going to take away your right for life. And your right to pursue happiness. And your right to liberty. How is that going to work? But they don't see that. Because I guess they never studied the French Revolution. And realizes that as they keep going on the path, they're going on the path to the French Revolution. And the results will not be pretty. Notice in verse 2, and Aaron said unto them, break off the golden earring which are in your ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. And all the people brake off the golden earrings which were in the ears, and brought them unto Aaron. And he received them at his hand, and fashioned it with a graven tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. And they rose up early in the morrow and offered burnt offering and peace offering, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go, get thee down, for thy people which you broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. Notice here, they change. It's not just, they start to worship the Egyptian god. They're going back to Egypt. And so when you see a people that they start to like, oh no, we don't recognize those things anymore, that's significant to watch. And as I say, I'll be watching it here, but you need to observe. You need to listen to these people, and they say, nope, we taking away their rights. Why? Oh, because we need to prosper. And you're going to prosper by taking away people's rights? Okay, you will prosper. You can create tyranny. Notice here, it says here, and they turn aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made them a molten calf, and have worshipped it, and have sacrificed thereunto, and said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which have brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Behold, it is a stiff-necked people, hard-headed. The founding fathers gave and written this beautiful thing, I believe, under the dictate, the guidance of the Lord. And for good reasons why there's a separation of church and state. And more Americans want to abolish that. Good reason why there's these rights given, these freedoms given, are stated and recognized, because these freedoms are like, you can't take away that from a man. But as it says, these are stiff-necked people. Verse 10 says, Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath might wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. And Moses besought the Lord his God, and said, Lord, why doth thy wrath wax hot against thy people, which thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt with great power, and with a mighty hand? Wherefore should the Egyptians speak, say, For mischief did he bring them out, to slay them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth. Turn from thy fierce wrath, and repent of this evil against thy people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, thy servant, to whom thou swearest by thine own self, and said unto them, I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of will I give unto your seed, and they shall inherit it forever. And the Lord repented of the evil which he thought to do unto this people. Beautiful reading there. So wanted to read that, especially verse 14. The Lord repented of the evil that he wanted to do to these people. And this is why we have to pray for the country. When I say the country, we're talking about the citizens. I like to make that clarification because we see the direction where the people want to go back. I don't know where they want to go back to. Also, we have to pray for the president because we see that evil men are influencing him and counseling him. These things are just not happening just so. I pray for the situation in the nation because, as you know, you can have counselors that counsel you, but you have to want to listen to that counsel. Because two people come to you and one say, hey, look, man, I don't think you should do this. I don't think that's a wise idea. You're going to do what? You're going to torture these kids by separating them from their parents, even toddlers? I don't think that's a good idea. And another person come and say, oh no, this is not constitution. You're within the law, president. You have to give these rights. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you can't do this. And so the president have to want to hear a person says that. Now, two people could say two different things, but he's going to lean to whatever sounds sweetest to his ears because he himself, that's why we have to pray that the Holy Spirit hold back the wages of strife. The Holy Spirit can do things and God can cause things to happen to slow stuff down. And that's always pray for, that God slow stuff down, because you see whoever is in power, conservative or liberal, they keep pushing the nation into doing things that God is against. And that is what the trouble is. And as that happens, we know that when country does this, God breaks out and starts slaughtering people. And that's where the problem is. As we saw, as I say, the increase in diseases, the increase in violence, the increase in all these things are happening. And we're going to see more. So we have to pray that God slows this whole process down while his people have been sealed. Because we see the push to put all these kind of people who have an unsavory history and monstrous ideas and monstrous thoughts, devilish thoughts, into key positions. And so we can see slowly, we can actually watch and see how a nation fall. We see how Hitler came to power. We can understand it in our own time and say, oh, you put all the key monsters around you, and then you can go forward any evil and nobody to tell you, hey, no, don't do that. I'm saying, pray for America, pray for the people. What we're seeing here is not good. And as you know, the Bible says, righteousness exalts a nation. So somebody said, but righteousness is thou shalt not steal. As I said, there are certain things that it might not be clear, but it's self-evident. And as you observe life, you'll be like, I see, all men are really created equal. You know, because I'll be driving on the road and somebody's driving crazy. And I'm like, why is this person driving like that? And I say, oh, yeah, it's somebody from that group of people. They all don't know to drive. But that same person could teach me a thing or two about probably chemistry and blow me away out of the water. And so I observe life. I'm like, life is weird. Really, all men are created equal. Everybody has their talents and abilities, their weaknesses. And we all in this boat together. We all striving. We all trying to live in this life. But people get prideful and think, oh, I'm unique. I'm the greatest human beings. I'm the best. And that's where people mess up. They don't show no mercy to those who they think is less fortunate, not knowing that these people have something to offer to them, just as though they have something to offer to others. Pride is a terrible thing. Let's pray. We thank you, O Lord, again for your love towards us and the blessings of knowing you, the only true God. We thank you, dear Lord, for acknowledging your creative works and acknowledging your rules and your laws and accepting Jesus into our heart. May you bless us, dear Lord, that we might be like thee in all the things we do, all the decisions we make. Bless each and every one that is here listening, and be with them as they either are at work or going to work. Bless them with a productive day, I pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. Well, thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow morning again live, where we should do Wisdom for Living. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.